This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com. And today we have one of your favorite guests returning again. I believe this might be the fifth time.
Yeah.
None other than The Undertaker's debut match, Bundy's debut match, many wrestlers' debut match, Mario Mancini. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, I'm doing well. I can't tell you how happy I am to be back again. You know, I was watching your shoot interview with superstar Billy Graham today. So really sad to see that he passed away. But that was back in 2011, I believe. And Billy, true to his form, he came back. He had the gi gimmick, right? He was doing the karate stuff when he came back. I kind of marked out when I saw him because I cried like a baby in '77 when I was 11 years old when he beat Bruno. So very sad.
And of course, what a lot of people don't remember is he actually sold out the Garden with that karate gimmick, even though it was considered unsuccessful compared to his other gimmicks. I mean, they were selling out with over 20,000 back then. It wasn't what they'd call it today, a 10 or 12,000 sellout.
Right. Well, I said it 1,000 times. I'm going to say it again. When I was 7 years old in 1973, my family lived in the projects in Stanford, and I was the last of 6 kids, and it was the Brady Bunch. It was 3 girls and 3 boys, and my oldest sister got married in 1970 when I was 4. So my other 2 sisters had 1 bedroom, and myself and my brothers there were 3 beds in the bedroom. And my brother Ralph was 13 years older than I was, and my brother Bob is 12 years older than I was. I was the youngest one. So, when I was 7, my brother Ralph was 20. So I got up, whether I got up to go to the bathroom or whatever, and he had that 12-inch black and white TV with a pair of vice grips on the knob to turn it because the knob had broken. And it had to be after midnight on a Saturday night. And he said, "Come here." I said, "What?" He said, "See that guy there, right there?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "That's Bruno Sammartino. That's the greatest wrestler that ever lived." And I got hooked on Bruno. But not only did I get hooked on Bruno, I got hooked on the wrestling period. I got hooked on Haystacks and Bruno and Superstar Billy Graham and Baron Miguel Cicluna and the Mighty Igor and even Johnny Rods and all these other guys. And I think the reason why Graham sold out the Garden, even with that gi gimmick, is because those fans still existed. I broke into the wrestling business. I was showing one of my students because I'm coming across a weird thing in my life. I've been teaching since 1989. Now, when I say teaching pro wrestling in a wrestling school, Tony Altomar had left the wrestling school, and he had a falling out with the owners. And Georgiana Passarello came up to me and she goes, "2 choices. Either you take over the wrestling school, being in the business for 5 years, either you take over the wrestling school or I'm going to take down the ring and put more gym equipment there." And I said, no, I'll take it. And, Roma came through there in '84. Steve Blackman came through there. Ted Arcidi came through there. JT Southern came through there. So, I've been teaching since '89 and kind of without a hitch, just teaching, and I'm very honest about myself at Paradise Alley when I teach. And of course, Rome is my partner. So when a brand new student comes in, like a guy's joining on Monday, he came in this past Monday, and I said, why aren't you going right to Roma? Why aren't you going to the guy that was in WrestleMania? Why aren't you going to him? Why are you starting out with me? And the guy actually looked at me and went, I don't know. I go, I'm going to tell you why. Because if you Google me, I'm probably one of the top 10 losers in professional wrestling history. And there's nobody better to teach you how to fall than me. Oh, and I start teaching. And Hannibal, I don't know what's going on, but it seems like when I teach something 1 week and I go to apply it 3 weeks later, they forget. I've never experienced this before. So I have a lot of patience. But last night, one of the female wrestlers was talking to me about this move that I think it's Nikki Bella does or whatever. And I'm trying to teach them the business, the wrestling business. And I put on Strongbow's return match after Greg Valentine broke his leg. I said, I want you to watch this match. And I think 4 minutes went by before they even touched each other. So I'm trying to get them into the psychology of pro wrestling, as well as the psychology is even bigger than the moves, in my opinion. But, we all hanker for those guys. That's why 1,800 people walk through the gate at a wrestling convention to see Bret Hart, to see Tito Santana, Ted DiBiase, Demolition, the Warlord, the Barbarian, Beefcake, Valentine, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. These are all wrestlers. The reason why the Garden sold out so much is because wrestling was so different back then. Chief just started dancing, and he whacked Valentine with one punch, and the place went nuts. You do that today, people are going to go, man, where's the super kick? Where's the guy slapping his leg with the super kick? So,
Billy mentioned that in one of his interviews with me, actually, that their careers are shorter today because they do a lot more than they did in the past and get less reactions actually than in the past.
I tell you, one night, and I know, guys, I have this incredible memory, but I don't remember where I was. I'm so sorry. I don't remember what state I was in. And I'm pretty sure I was working with Iron Mike Sharp. I worked with him a lot. We tore the place down a lot of times. And I came back to the dressing room and I said to Arnold Skolin, Arnie, how was it? Because every night they got to report back to Vince on the matches. And he goes, it was good, kid. It was really good. It was good. Just one thing. I go, what's that? He goes, you threw 100 punches. I go, on my comeback, he goes, yeah, I threw a lot of punches. I go, was I not supposed to? He goes, no. I just want to teach you something, though. You see that guy over there in the corner? He throws one. It'll get a bigger pop than you. And he was pointing to Pedro Morales. That one haymaker, you throw the guy against the ropes and give him that one punch to the gut, one punch, and the place would go crazy. So I think I would never question Superstar Billy Graham. He's absolutely correct. I remember meeting Mick Foley for the only time I ever met Mick Foley. I said, thanks, Mick. He goes, for what? I go, you changed the whole scope of the business. Because back then, and people have to realize that the wrestling was good back then in the 70s and 80s, but it was also very cautious because there were no guarantees. There were no guaranteed contracts. If you didn't work, you didn't get paid. If you didn't work, you didn't get paid. It wasn't, that's okay, you're getting a check anyway. It's, you didn't work, you're not getting paid. So no one would take a high risk. You know, I see that, Scott.
Yeah, so don't talk bad about him again, because he's going to know this time.
Yeah. So nobody would take those risks because if you didn't work, you didn't get paid. So yeah, things were a little slower back then. Things were, it's not like today. If you get hurt, you're still getting a check. You have a contract, you're still getting a check. So Billy's right.
Yeah, the one thing I noticed about last time they released Bray Wyatt, he had been off work actually for 4 months, making 4 million a year. So that's 1 month, or sorry, 1 million for not doing any work, where that would never happen in the old days. And now I think he's still under contract, although supposedly he's off the internal roster, but he hasn't wrestled since like January-ish. So I can understand the difference between today and back then, because back then, if you didn't wrestle, as you said, you didn't get paid. So it was a different breed of wrestlers and a more cautious breed.
No, I mean, Kurt Hennig was the first guy I ever heard of taking out, and it was $5,000 a month. That's what was told to me. He took out an insurance policy with Lloyd's of London that if he got hurt and he couldn't wrestle, that insurance company would pay him. That's the only guy I know that had that kind of security. Other than that, if you didn't work, you didn't get paid. You didn't work, you didn't get paid.
Very true. And as you're saying about the punches, I was recently editing the Great North Wrestling matches that took place a couple weeks ago here in Canada, and I noticed one particular kid. His match wasn't that bad, but he has terrible punches. So I would suggest to young wrestlers out there, don't punch if you can't do them good. You could do chops, you can do forearms to the chest, forearms to the back, you can do forearms, but there's no need to punch, and work on the punch if you're going to do them.
1,000%, 1,000%, Hannibal. You hit it right on the head. You hit it right. I watched, because we run wrestling shows inside of Paradise Alley, small shows. And, that was on a Saturday. The heel's getting up the heat. He's got the baby face picking him up, and the baby face, while he's on his knees, starts punching him in the gut. So I go into Monday night's class, and I get in the ring, and I go on my knees, and I go, Big Daddy, the guardian chaos, you're not kayfabe. So I'm on my knees, and I go, this shit doesn't fly. It looks like you're a 3-year-old throwing a punch. I said, you're going to have to get some distance. And when you're on both knees or one knee, you're going to have to come in straight. Straight. I go, none of this side shit. While you're on your knees, just come in straight to the stomach. Straight. I go, it looks horrible. Another thing I told them the other night was, you throw a guy into the turnbuckle and you go to give him a clothesline while he's in the buckle. You're leaping him, giving him that clothesline. I go, why is he going to wait for it? Why would he do that? I go, every single match does the same thing. Why is he going to wait for it? I go, when you throw him into the buckle and he's running into the buckle, follow him in. So when he pivots and hits the buckle, that clothesline's right in his face. It's all timing. So there's a lot to learn in today's wrestling. So
That's 100% for sure. Well, while you're at it, what's the secret to a good punch? I've seen a video where Kevin Sullivan's punching a can on his deck at his house off of Seattle. Did you ever see that technique, or how were you taught when you
Tony
were?
Lamar told me to go to a hardware store and get like 6x6 mirrors and put them up with clothespins. And if I don't break the mirror, then I'm doing pretty good. But Tito got a hold of me and he helped me with my punches. But the way I teach punches is just say, listen, you know how you look at somebody and say, okay. I go, now close your fingers. That's how the punch ends. Your hands, your fingers are human shocks. So you start out like this, but you end like this here, straight in. And the thing with rookie wrestlers is they'll punch and stop. And all of a sudden they discover that I go follow through. I go, you ever see a fight where somebody punches somebody and their fist gets stuck in their neck? No, they follow through. So follow through with the punch. And when they follow through, they find that controlling the punch is even a little easier. We have some pretty good punchers, I have to say, at Paradise Alley. So, and you know, I had a decent punch, and Roma had a hell of a punch. So, I'm I'm thankful for that.
Ibsen says it was great meeting you at the '80s Wrestling Con a couple weeks ago.
Well, I had a lot of fun there. You know, I had dinner with Steve Kern, and I never met Steve Kern before. I was just I shouldn't say that. I never talked extensively to Steve Kern. I was his debut match with Skinner. I was the first guy he wrestled in the another guy, Hannibal. I was his debut match with Skinner. But of course, in those days, you said, "How you doing? What's your finish?" And you went in there, got the shit knocked out of you, went back into the dressing room, shook hands, said, "Thank you very much, my pleasure," and that was it. But I got to sit across from him from dinner, and I'm like, Hannibal, as you know, Hannibal, some of these guys, I mean, so quick. I'm like, Strongbow, Chief J Strongbow was like a second father to me. And he goes, was there a problem with your first one? And I went, no, I had a great father. There was no problem with my first father. Oh, he goes, okay. So now I tell him about the Valentine match. And this is when Roma lost it. I got nervous. I never saw Roma laugh that hard. So he goes, oh, Valentine was your first match? And I said, yeah. I said, I wanted to get something in. And Valentine said, so you want to come back? And I said, yeah. And Valentine looked at me and said, when you submit to the figure four, you can get up from the canvas and come back to the dressing room. And without skipping a beat, right after I said the word room, Kern sat up. He goes, were you able to get that in? And Roma just lost it. He just lost it, and I lost it. And I'm like, oh, this guy's a funny son. What a great guy. With Steve Kern, what a fantastic guy. I want to get a fan fest that's like a weekend that Scott Wilder books him, that I can actually spend the weekend with the guy, because all I'm going to do is laugh my ass off the whole time, which is the point of me doing these things. Something unfortunate did happen to me at the '80s con, and I'm going to stay true to my form because that's who I am. I really made a horrible mistake. I felt about this big. I felt like I still do feel like a really, really bad person. So I've been on another podcast where Randy Hogan was the guest and I was on with him. And I just found a love for Randy Hogan, you know, because I feel like we went through the same thing. We had the similar careers. He was the Mario Mancini of the WCW, and I was the Randy Hogan of the WWF. So we really connected. And he's like, "Oh, brother, can't wait to meet you. Can't wait to meet you in New Jersey." And we had this documentary following us, this wrestling documentary, um, that we met 20 minutes outside of the gig, and they got into my car and they filmed Roma and I. Last August, I did a 3-hour interview with them. These Hollywood documentaries or whatever for TV, they take forever. So they followed us into the place. In fact, we had to leave the convention, go back out in the lobby because the guy had to change his camera. And then he followed us walking in, saying hello to everybody. And Randy Hogan came up to meet me, and he had a walker. For some reason, my brain went that it was a work. My brain clicked like Hogan's 69 or 70. You know, he's old, and the Hogan gig, it's old. So it's Hulk Hogan. My brain said it was Hulk Hogan with a walker. And I looked at him, and he kind of dismissed it. And I said, "It's pretty good, man. That's pretty good." So I was sitting there. Roma was to the left of me. I was sitting there. Rita Marie was to the right of me. And it went Randy Hogan and I think Steve Kern. And I had leaned back beyond Rita's chair to look down at Randy. And I said, "Brother, you know, I had surgery last year. I got one of those at home. If I knew you were bringing yours, I would have brought mine, man. We could have walked around this whole place with it." And he kind of went like that, right? So now the thing is over, and we're going to the restaurant. And I didn't see him leave. And he walks through the door of the restaurant with a walker. And I go, "That's a shoe?" He went, "Yeah." I went, "What? What?" He goes, "Yeah, Mario, it's a shoe." I went, "Oh my God, I'm an asshole. Oh my God, I'm so sorry." I said, "What a dick." I go, "I'm so sorry, Randy. I thought it was a work." He goes, "Mario, if I was going to do a work, why would it be with a walker?" I go, "Hey, Hogan's old. You know, everybody. I go, I'm."
Kurt Angle, to your credit, Kurt Angle tried to start a rumor that Hogan had a walker at Philadelphia for their Raw anniversary show, if you remember that a few months ago.
I didn't hear that or recall that, but during dinner, you know, of course, I got the ribs, which I deserved. And, you know, the day after when we were home, uh, I got a text from Randy, and it was just his walker. And I'm like, "Oh, brother, I am so sorry, man. I'm so sorry. I had no idea." He goes, "My ankle was replaced." I had no idea. I'm so sorry." I go, "I thought it was a work, man. I thought it was a work." You know, and of course, Wilder's getting on it. He's sending me walkers, and he's going, "You know what, Mancini, I thought you were a nice guy, pretty insensitive son of a bitch." I'm like, I swear to God, I thought it was a work. I didn't know it was. I swear to God, and I still feel horrible to this day. So, you know, my apologies to Randy. I just really, I don't, and his family. I just don't. I'm just not that guy. I'm not that guy, and I just felt so. I felt like a jerk, man. I felt so horrible. It's terrible.
Did you ever hear the story that Johnny Valentine, Greg Valentine's father, who was in a wheelchair after the plane accident, the plane crash that Ric Flair was in, he got drunk and fell over in his wheelchair once, and someone pissed on him as a
No,
rib? Oh God!
I
Yeah.
never heard of that one, man. Listen, I never heard of it, but I believe it because if Fuji could shit in everybody's bag, you definitely can get pissed on, without a doubt. no problem at all.
Yeah, and he was a bad ribber, so I guess this was some sort of revenge. So he actually took it as a rib.
Yeah, I don't. That's a rough one, man. That's worse than the H bomb and shaving half your head, half your mustache, half your privates. You wake up, you got a body of half a hair. You know that the Bulldogs were famous for that one. So
What was the worst rib you saw the Bulldogs pull? Obviously, we all know the famous one. I think it was actually Kurt Hennig that did the one that started the Rougeau thing that the Bulldogs took the blame for. But is there any that you witnessed the Bulldogs do? We know they tormented Outback Jack, but I don't know if you were around then or not.
who I was there when Jack got fired. The worst rib that I've told was with a guy like me. Don't know the kid. Don't know him at all. But they asked him to watch the dog. They were staying in the same hotel. He said, "Oh, you mind watching the dog?" What's the kid gonna say? No to the British Bulldogs? No, no, I don't. I'll watch Matilda. I don't mind. I don't mind. Um, what they gave him? They gave him a laxative, the dog laxative, and the kid was up all night cleaning up shit in the hotel room.
Didn't they get Quick Draw McGraw fired from because they actually like spiked one of his drinks or something, then put him in a shopping cart and wheeled them somewhere
Yeah,
public? I heard, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And you know what? Rick was a good guy. He was a really good guy. Yeah, they did a lot of things to a lot of people. To a lot of people. There are a million stories out there, but all I know is that the next day at TV, that kid was dead tired, and he was telling everybody, I don't know, the dog was sick. You know, he was shitting everywhere all night, and I don't want to get charged for the hotel room and all the damage and everything. So I just kept cleaning up his shit all night. So
By
I
the
don't.
way, it was Red Bastien that pissed on Johnny Valentine.
Oh, listen, I don't know. I'd have to talk to Hammer.
Apparently, Red Bastien's dick was called the Bishop, I heard, and he liked to show it off.
Well, I don't know that generation, but my generation had Virgil and Leapin' Lanny Poffo. May he rest in peace. That was my generation. You know, Virgil didn't quite ever see anything like that before.
Did
And
you
we
ever
all,
get to see Lanny perform his
well,
little trick that he's
but,
talked about publicly?
you know, Lanny would do that in house shows sometimes as to make the boys laugh. But you know what? I've never seen him do it. Roma could correct me if I'm wrong. I never seen him do it at a TV. However, he's been asked by on request. Lanny, can you? No. But
Yeah, that that kind of stuff just wouldn't happen in dressing rooms nowadays. Could you
oh
imagine in 2023? Hey,
oh no
we hear you can suck your own dick.
oh
Could you
but,
show us?
yeah no oh no. Listen, I remember in Poughkeepsie, New York, that Cyndi Lauper would always come down to the dressing room with her husband Dave Wolf. Always. And SD Jones was getting a little aggravated with it. You know, you catch SD on a wrong night, man. You don't want to piss him off. So he goes, boss man, I'm tired of this, boss man. And I go, oh, she's just walking down here, man. It's kayfabe. You know, how come she's not kayfabe? You know, I'm sick of this. And you know, if you knew SD and the faces he made, he goes, watch this, boss man, watch, boss man, watch. So you know, he's getting dressed. You know, it's an hour before showtime or whatever, hour and a half. And he just sits there with a white towel around his waist, She comes down, he drops it. Oh, oh. And SD had an elephant trunk. He just, oh, that cured that.
Yeah, I think I remember Tony Atlas mentioning that SD had that blessing, you could call it.
Yeah,
Uh,
SD have that blessing. Yeah, he did.
Someone wants to know any memories of Bushwhacker Butch, who sadly passed away. Did you see him that weekend? Were
I
you at
know,
WrestleMania?
but you know what? I know he's not on the show, but who was front and center holding the phone up to his family was Scott Wilder, because Scott Wilder booked them, Butch and Luke, and it was going to be epic because they weren't together for 30 years, and Luke and Scott had a concern because Butch is like, yeah, I didn't take my medication. And Scott's like, well, Scott hung around the Bushwhackers for so long with these appearances. So he just turns around and says, why'd you do that, mate? He got the mate thing going. I think Scott went home and started calling his friends mate. He hung around the Bushwhackers for so long. So he goes, why did you do that? And he goes, it's a water pill. So I don't want to keep getting up from my table from signing autographs to go take a piss. And, when Scott told me the story, I said, Jesus, Scott, could have ran to a drugstore because the drugstore sells the urinals they use in the hospital. I go, could have had that. Jesus, put a pair of Depends on the guy or something. The guy lost his life because he didn't want to take a piss. So, he started getting congestive heart failure and ended up in the hospital. And Scott and Luke just basically watched him pass away. I don't have a lot of stories about the Bushwhackers, other than shaking their hand and going, "How you doing?" You got to remember that most of my friends were healed because I worked with them and developed a relationship with them. Other than guys like Tony Atlas and SD Jones, Tito Santana, I became friends. I called Tito this week and booked them. Well, Scott Wilder booked them, but well, yeah, I don't have. I know that there were good guys. They didn't really, they weren't. I didn't see him do a lot of jokes in the dressing room like I seen Kurt Hennig and the other guys. Kurt Hennig was amazing with a yo-yo. He did shit with a yo-yo I've never seen before in my life. I would just sit there and watch him. But I was good friends with Ray too, Hercules Hernandez. That's the guy I missed too. But now the Bushwhackers they were together since I think 1972 or something like that.
And they were like in their 40s by the time they got their WWE push, from what I understand too. So they were up there. They I don't know if they ever looked good, but they aged pretty well. Even Luke doesn't look that old now, and I think he's still wrestling in his 70s.
But yeah, Luke was funny because we went out to dinner and Scott goes, "Listen, do you mind taking Luke to Luke to the airport?" I go, "No, well, Roma's in the car. We got my other brother in there, Kevin, is in the car, and Luke is, mate, we're gonna be able to make my flight." I'm like, "Yeah," and again, Steve Kern. I'm outside with Steve Kern outside the restaurant because I couldn't get any service in there, so I'm showing him the match, right? He gave me nothing. Absolutely beat the living hell out of me, right? So we're just silent there, looking over, looking down at the phone, watching the match. And about a minute went by, and Kern shakes his head. He goes, "I must have liked you." I go, "Why is that?" He goes, "I could see here I gave you way too much." Roma lost his shit again, and he just started busting because he gave me nothing, zero. He goes, "I gave you way too much." And then Luke's like, get him over here. I gotta go. Let's go. I gotta get to the fucking airport. Let's go. So, we got him off to the airport. I gave him a hug and I said again, man, I'm sorry about Butch. It's horrible. And he said, thanks, mate. I appreciate that. And off he went to his flight. So
the story I remember, I think Luke told me about Bush, was Adrian Street was joking around in the dressing room once and stuck his dick at Butch and said, talk to the microphone, and Butch put his mouth on it and gave it a kiss. Yeah, and Luke actually said that on tape in one of his interviews to me too. He told me that in the car, but oh my god.
Oh.
You wouldn't see that today either in the dressing room.
And ladies and gentlemen, by my reaction, now you know why I stayed a jobber. No. Oh, no. Hannibal, there's ribs, then there's no.
They go back to Stampede days, so they were pretty close, I guess. But who? I think that was more of a joke than.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll say this on this show, and next year it'll be Roma and I. It's our 40th year being friends. We met in '84. I'm not doing that. And if I did that to Roma, he'd probably punch me right there, and I'd be on my way to the ER.
Yeah, and speaking of Roma, I didn't know this until yesterday. I thought he was still wrestling on your shows, but he's retired now. Unless he gets an offer he really can't refuse. So
Right.
I'm sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, right. Well, in 2020, July 1st, he had a heart attack and he had a complete bypass. All four arteries. So, and he did wrestle after that, by the way. He called me up. I think it was in Germany. He called me up and he goes, hey. And like a year after his surgery, he's like, hey. I'm like, what's up, Roma? He goes, my chest is bleeding. I'm like, what do you mean your chest is bleeding? He goes, yeah, I caught it on an elbow. He goes, is the scar supposed to bleed like that? I'm like, oh my God, Roma, what are you doing? I go, no, it's not supposed to be checked out when I come home. I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, one of the toughest guys I ever met in my life, mentally and physically. Just, the guy, I always say this, the guy's not from this planet, because even when he had the Widowmaker, what they call it, the heart surgeon said to him, arteries supply blood to your heart, not your veins. Your veins supplied blood to your heart. That's the only reason why you're here. I go, of course, you're Roma. You're not from this planet. I go, of course they did. I go, anybody else would be dead, not you. I go, so I always, from the time I saw Roman when he was 25 years old, how agile he was. And I always call him the greatest athlete I've ever seen in my life. And, I will always say that he's not from this planet. I've seen him do things that just people can't do, including drop kicking John Studd, in the forehead. His left foot was on his forehead and his right foot was over his head. Still holds the record for the highest drop kick in pro wrestling history.
Someone brings up he was on an Australian dating show in the 80s. Did he ever tell you about that? Was that
yeah. Listen, I'll admit I was very jealous. I was very pissed because a lot of people went over on that tour. And I'm going to tell you what that tour's main reason was: to do commercials for Toyota in Australia. That's what their main reason was for. They went there to film commercials for Toyota in Australia. picking up tires and, you know, bouncing cars and everything for Toyota commercials. And they spotted Roma, and they put him on a dating game there. Yep, they sure did.
And with Billy passing, since you grew up kind of in the era, it was slightly before you got in WWE and started wrestling. I guess you would have been in high school during his championship run. Do you have a favorite match or a favorite feud that you saw him in during that time?
I when he took the belt from San Martino, like I was 11. Um, Prior to him taking the belt from Bruno, I always like to see, I always love to see his rivalries with Ivan Putski. Superstar Billy Graham and Ivan Putski. They'd always do the same thing. They would take that table and two chairs in the ring. And, you know, Putski wasn't the Putski of the 80s back in the 70s. He was more of that powerlifting kind of guy, just a big bruiser kind of looking guy. And they put that table and the two chairs in there. And Putski and Graham would go, he's just arm wrestling, arm wrestling, and arm wrestling. And, you know, Putski had him about an inch ready to beat him, and Superstar would just whip that chair from behind him and whack Putski over the back with the chair, you know. I love those with Superstar. I love this promos. My brother in particular would pick up on these little idiosyncrasies with Billy Graham when he would do his promos in the 70s. He goes, he always takes this giant breath before his sentences. He'd go, you know, he'd always take the big breath, you know, and he was fun to watch. And a lot of people are saying today that he's way ahead of his time. I mean, you know, I was showing my wrestling student last night with that strongbow match. You know, he was starting to get the heat up on him, and, you know, he wouldn't sell it, and he'd start dancing, and then he'd stand up straight and give him the bad mouth and then start knee lift him. I said, who's that look like? Who's that look like? And she couldn't answer me. I said, Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan took that from Strongbow. Hulk Hogan, you know, took his tearing shirt off and, you know, his get up and everything. He Superstar Billy Graham. Hogan admits that Superstar Billy Graham. Hogan admits that as a kid going to a wrestling show, you know, Superstar gets up on the second rope and does double bicep, and Hogan goes, that's who I want to be. I want to be like that guy. That's basically what I said when I saw Bruno. And when I went to wrestling school, you know, in 1980, when I was 14, when Bruno retired, I looked at my family and told them I'm going to be a wrestler and I'm going to be the next Bruno Sammartino. And they looked at me and said, okay. I go, no, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. I said that in 80 when I was 14. It didn't work out the way I thought it would. I didn't become the next Bruno. I became the next Frank Williams.
You wrestled in Madison Square Garden, though, didn't you?
I did. I wrestled Tony Atlas in Madison Square Garden. And even at the age of 18 years old, nobody had to tell me about the psychology of working with Tony Atlas. So the match wasn't talked about. The finish was just, you know, obviously he was going to press me over his head. But, you know, he outsmarted me a little bit. And the way I took over was raking his eyes. I would do that. Strongbow hated it. And I did it a few times in my 8 years, and once was in the Garden. But Strongbow finally got a hold of me one night in a house show, and he goes, Mancini, do me a favor. Don't ever do that again. It looks like shit. Don't do it. And I went, all right. And Hannibal, it's the fingers on the back, and you rake the back. And for some reason, Strongbow hated that. So I did that to him in the Garden, and I would put a forearm to his lower back. I mean, attacking a muscle guy where the muscles aren't, right? You know, with the exception of giving him a low blow, because that's cheap heat, right? No offense, Maurice, but that's cheap heat, right? So you can't do that. But the funny story everybody loves about me working with Tony Alice is, he got me up for the press slam, and as any good wrestler would do, you have your hands on his traps, on his shoulders. So when he pushes up, you're pushing down and you're helping him press you over his head. And right in the middle of the ring in Madison Square Garden, Atlas said, "Hey, kid, get your hands off my shoulders." And I went, and he went, boom. So, yeah, that was Tony Atlas.
And one more thing I saw today for Billy Graham is WWE put a video out, and I'm glad they put a video out. I'm not complaining about it. He deserves a tribute video, and I'm sure they're going to bring it up on SmackDown. But they said the WWE family lost a family member, and I personally helped him get his GoFundMe going along with friend of his, Mike, that we raised literally tens of thousands of dollars over the years for his various hospital bills. And what do you think of the WWE calling, like, acting like it's a family? Where were they when this icon needed money to stay alive? Thank you to the fans, by the way, that donated to that, but they're as big a corporation as it gets.
Well, the one thing I want to start off with is saying this. As I was being interrupted at work, obviously, because listen, it's work, and I shouldn't be doing that. But I was watching your shoot video with superstar Billy Graham. He loved you, Hannibal. He really liked you a lot. When you said, "Would you walk me out?" He goes, "Yes, I'll walk you out." And I'm like, wow. I mean, he really loved you. You should be happy, not even happy as a mark. And I'm not saying that. I would never say that. But as a peer, because you were a wrestler, I mean, as a peer, for somebody like him to take a liking like that to you is very special. Number
Yeah,
one.
actually, you reminded me of that. I forgot. He did say that the only thing that would get him to go back to Madison Square Garden is if he were to walk me to
Well,
the ring. But
that's
he
right.
tried to get me in WWE too, and Gerald Briscoe tried, but he had no pull. But I won't digress. But yes, thank you for reminding me that. I appreciated that.
Yeah. It really, so that being said, it's kind of confusing because I don't know if they still do it now. They did back then, but I can call if I was, which obviously, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not. But if I called the WWE and said, "Listen, I'm finally admitting that I'm a really bad alcoholic and I need help," they'll say, "Okay, Mario, we're going to send you to a rehab. We're going to pay for it." Supposedly, their history of drug rehab and alcohol rehab for present or past wrestlers, they will take care of for them. So it kind of gets me when you have somebody like superstar Billy Graham that needed so much help, and they didn't help him with his medical expenses. You know, it I appreciate it. I really do. From the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it. But I get kind of I get thrown back. It kind of takes me back when somebody goes, well, you were a carpenter. You were so important in an integral part of the business. And even Steve Lombardi makes a good point where they should bring back jobbers because you know what, the attendance would be better because you got a star against a jobber, and the people pay the money to see the star against the star. But on today's TV, you flick on the TV, you got star against the star. They don't have to pay and go and see it. It's on the TV. So I appreciate the accolades that the fans give me. I really do. But it's people like superstar Billy Graham, legends. I mean, legends. I mean, they were the trendsetters. They were the ones to create new things in wrestling. You know what I mean? They pioneered it. Superstar Billy Graham and Bruno Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko and all these Dusty Rhodes and all these legends. You know what I mean? That didn't get the respect that they deserved. You know what I mean? Superstar Billy Graham was huge. It was huge. And I know probably to the minute he died, and I don't know if you believe it, Hannibal, but I do. I do. And I wish I had the ability to go back in time and say, not that I have anything against Hulk Hogan. I have nothing against him. And to look at Hulk Hogan and go, we changed our mind. It's not going to be you. It's going to be Billy Graham. We're going to take Superstar Billy Graham. We're going to repackage him. And he's going to go forward with all this WrestleMania stuff. He's going to be the guy. And in my heart and in my wrestling mind, he could have done it and he could have carried it. And I know Hulkamania changed everything, but Graham could have done it. I believe that. I believe that.
I heard Meltzer say on his radio show the other day that one of the reasons Billy went into such a depression after losing to Backlund was because he was so popular and he had this 95% sellout rate, and he truly believed because he was so popular, even though it was said he was going to lose on this date to Backlund, they would actually still let him continue because he had all that momentum. So I can understand why he went into that depression too, because instead of just going with the momentum, they switched it. Backlund was a success overall, but he wasn't a trendsetter like Graham, and certainly wasn't copied by the Ric Flairs, Jesse Ventura's, Hulk Hogan's, Scott Steiner's, Dusty Rhodes to some extent. I mean, it's too bad, but whatever. At least people will remember him, and I'm glad WWE did the video overall.
Yeah, I mean, I have no right saying this. I have a new catchphrase now that I just stumbled over. Because I have no right saying this because I am the lowest on the wrestling food chain. So I'm the lowest form on the wrestling food chain. So maybe I have no right to say this. And I love Bob Backlund. I've been with Bob. I love Bob as a person, but I think the thing with Bob Backlund wasn't about Bob Backlund. It was about Vince Sr. being right, wanting to be right. It was his decision. It was his baby. And it was about Vince Sr. being right, trying to show everybody that he was right. And the thing about it is I look at Backlund as a success. However, if you talk to Graham, they had to do an angle with Bruno and Zbyszko to sell out the Garden because Backlund wasn't doing it. So that's why they had that big thing going with Bruno and Zbyszko, teacher against student turning on teacher, because they needed Bruno back to fill the seats.
Yeah, and Billy was on the undercard, and they would often bring Andre the Giant, so they were more stat cards from top to bottom than, like, for instance, Superstar was the draw, where Backlund was a draw, but there was a hell of a lot of other stars on the card, from what I understand.
I tell you what, the first time I ever saw Superstar Billy Graham was at Stanford High School. I still have the program. Was in Stanford High School in 1976. He came to Stanford High School, and he was just enormous. He was just an enormous human being, man. I just sat there as a 10-year-old, like, wow, and I think that night he was working with Putski. I think he was working with Putski. But, he was an icon. Another guy that wasn't used to his full potential. I looked Steve Keirn in the face on Cheap Heat. I said, I don't get it. I go, listen, I have no right to this opinion, but you're one of the best technical wrestlers I've ever seen. I said, they throw this gimmick on you and you just come in and punch and kick and squash people. To me, they didn't use you to your fullest capacity. You really didn't get to display your talents. You know
The
what I mean?
thing about Kern, though, he may have said this to you. He said this to me in the interview, and Kevin Sullivan actually confirmed to me this was true. It was between him and Backlund for Vince Senior's selection because they wanted the All-American boy, and Kern was like the son of a Vietnam vet. And despite playing Skinner well, he had good looks earlier on in his career. So supposedly he could have been the Backlund, but ultimately Backlund got it.
Wow, I never heard that. I never heard that. I'd like to hear that story the next time I'm with Kern, that's for sure. But that, you know, and I understand Vince Senior was good to everyone. I wish I worked for him. You know what I mean? Because they say the difference between Vince Senior and Junior was night and day. That Vince Senior really cared about the boys and really looked after the boys. But I never heard that one. But you know, listen. I sat there and I watched Backlund on TV as a kid doing the Harvard step test and all this other stuff. But, you know, on the precipice of 57 years old, and I look back on those days and it's different when you watch a promo um, when you're a fan compared to when you're a pro and smartened up. I mean, Bob's promos were like in a whisper. And then you got a guy like superstar Billy Graham that, if you were half asleep and he started his promo, well, hell, you woke up. You know what I mean? So it's like,
To me, Bob was best as the heel Mr. Backlund by far, as
I mean,
far as entertainment value.
I wasn't watching it then. I missed those days, but I watched it on YouTube and I agree with you. I mean, he was really, really good at that. I mean, really, really good at that. Way better than the 70s and early 80s. That was his real niche. That I watched a lot of Mr. Backlund on YouTube because I don't watch wrestling. But hopefully one of my guys from Paradise Alley be signed soon, and I'll have no choice but to watch wrestling again. But yeah, I thought that was his best run too, as Mr. Backlund.
My best memory of Bob Backlund was at a house show in Kingston, Ontario, that I saw during the WWE's down years. There was maybe only 900 people there, but Bob came out like 5 minutes before the card started, and just like walked around and looked at the different sides of the ring, and the crowd was like booing like crazy. He didn't have to say anything. He just had his robe on and had his arrogant look, and he like fired the crowd up. He had amazing heel heat, and that wasn't even before his match. For whatever reason, he just wanted to come out before the show. He told me when I interviewed him, he wanted to gauge the crowd probably, and he did that quite often. But like that was one of the times, even though it was a small crowd, it was one of the loudest boos I've ever heard in person from him, just staring, not going on the mic or anything. He had that much heat.
Yeah, I that was the best. That was the best character he had. That was it was amazing run he had with that, and I think he became the champion again with it, right?
Yeah, he did, and
Yeah,
like that was a decent run to be perfectly honest, even though it was
yeah.
a downtime. Now we'll get maybe for if we have you on again, maybe we could have a whole topic on agents because Ibsen wants to know about several. Or that wasn't the question, but he had another question about all the agents. Maybe we could save that for a future podcast. But what's up with Paradise Valley Wrestling? What's going on
Paradise
with that?
Alley, Paradise Alley. We're busy. We're really busy. So um, I cut a deal with Armada Brewing Company in New Haven, Connecticut. Um, really cool owner. Um, we're going to run shows every first Saturday of the month during the summer. I'm going to try to push it to November because it's still pretty warm the first week of November. And it's in the parking lot of the brewing company. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm slated to do another 2 taco fests, one in New Hampshire, one in Shelton, Connecticut. We have a new product coming called Recharged. That's going to be on Friday nights. That starts June 2nd. And along with the regular house shows, we're going to have the biggest thing we have coming is June 10th at the Jewish Community Center in Woodbridge, Connecticut. Everybody reached out to this gentleman for his first match, but out of respect and loyalty to Paradise Alley, Richard Holiday, after being in remission from Hodgkin's lymphoma, is going to have his first match back June 10th for Paradise Alley at the JCC. So he called the doctor. I just got off the phone with him before I came on here. He goes, I'm just a little nervous. I called the doctor again and said, "Are you sure I'm cleared for this?" And he said, "You're good to go." So kind of like Mario Lemieux, who had the same thing, got back on the ice. We're thankful to God that Holiday came through, is in full remission. He's ready to lace his boots again. And that's the one that got delayed because it's going to rain like hell on Saturday. So it's going to June 3rd because it's an outside show. So we have the biggest thing coming is June 10th at the JCC. Holiday's return to the ring for the first time since he's been diagnosed with cancer. So,
well, that should be quite something. I suggest everyone come check that out. A fan pointed out that apparently Billy Graham used Eye of the Tiger in 1982 before Hulk Hogan. So there's another thing that you could add to this stolen
I believe
list.
I believe it. Billy Graham was the Pied Piper, man. Everybody followed him. And I'd be regretful here if I didn't mention that keep an eye on Scott Wilder Promotions on his site so you can see where we're going to be, whether we're going to be in Pittsburgh, Massachusetts, Ohio, and usually when you see me, you'll see Roma.
There you go. And I gotta point out this fan comment because I'm gonna have to watch this. That apparently when Vern Gagne was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, he said that he wished McMahon Jr. would have been more like McMahon Sr., further to what you were talking about earlier. So I never saw that, but that's funny. He got that little dig in.
You know what, Hannibal? It's really, I'm telling you, because one of my, I don't know if I'll mention his name. I don't know. He's a very close friend of mine. Well, I'll say, I won't say his name because he's still alive. I don't want to get any heat, but I'll say SD because SD's not here anymore. Both of these guys would tell me repeatedly, Mario, if you were only here when the old man was alive. Mario, if you were only here when the old man was alive, because I broke in right after he died. And he's like, if you were only here when the old man was alive, things would be a lot different. Things would be a lot different. He would have came up to you, said hello to you, wanted to know things about you. It would be totally different if the old man was alive. That's all they keep saying to me. So, and I'd say, what did he do different? And he just had a personal interest in everyone in the company. And he cared, and he was just a different guy. He was just a different guy from what I hear,
And by the way, I keep calling your company Paradise Valley because that's where Billy Graham is from.
Yeah.
And like that's in my head, but it's Paradise Alley. But I just want to say one cool story about I went to a Chili's once in Phoenix with Billy Graham, and on the way out, where I'm paying the bill at the cash, and I look and there's like a sign that says Paradise Valley Chili's. And it just happened to be that we were actually in Paradise Valley, Arizona on that night. So I wish I had taken a picture. It was before camera phones became a thing, but I thought that was such a cool moment.
Right.
But thanks for joining us again, Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling.
Yeah, actually,
great school, and we'll let you close this off with whatever you want to say. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate it, man. We actually Roma came up with the name of the wrestling school. We didn't know what to name it. And when it comes to names, Roma's the king. When it comes to names and gimmicks, giving people a gimmick and a wrestling name, Roma's got the brain. So he came up with Paradise Alley Professional Wrestling. And I said, you sure you want to do that? Because I did graduate from law school. I said, I don't want a cease and desist letter. You know, he goes, well, I go, obviously you took it from the movie Paradise Alley in 1978, which is about professional wrestling that had Sylvester Stallone in it and Terry Funk in it. And it was kind of a spinoff of Mice and Men. So we ended up putting it on social media, and we actually got a tweet from Sylvester Stallone that said, you guys took a page out of my book. I wish you all the best of luck. Anyway, with Hannibal not here, I have to tell you guys that I find it amazing that I'm on the show for the 5th time, because I do see the guests that he has, and I'm still just puzzled why I'm sitting here, because like I said, I'm at really lowest form of the food chain of pro wrestling, but I'm very thankful that I've been on for the 5th time. I hope I come on for the 6th time, and I'd be more than happy to talk about the agents. The biggest thing I'd like to talk about the agents is their personality and what they taught me, and the amazing things that they taught me. There were a lot of them, so I'd be more than happy to talk about that. And as always, I appreciate you. Well, no, Corey, please. Somebody offered me $5,000 for that. My house caught fire Thanksgiving Day, 1998, and it went through the attic. My red ring jacket, my purple ring jacket, and my black ring jacket with the white block letters, gone. So, thank you guys. Until I see you again, can't wait to come on again. I'm very thankful to Hannibal. You know, I really appreciate it. I'm really just kind of humbled by it. So, see you again. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV